Business owners are often coming to me because they are frustrated with a certain team member. They want somebody to be more proactive, to take more ownership of their role, and they find that they're not moving forward on their own. They're waiting for the business owner to tell them what to do, and they're being really reactive. We're going to talk about 4 different things that you can look for to help improve this situation and how to potentially avoid it in the future. A common frustration that business owners have is that their team members are being really reactive and not proactive. They feel like their team members maybe aren't taking initiative, they're not taking leadership in certain areas, they're not really being effective at the role, they're not proactively reaching the outcomes that membership owner or business owner has set for them. And they're trying to decide whether they need a new team member, whether they need to hire somebody at a more strategic and leadership level, or whether they need to address this with that particular team member. This is really common for many reasons, and when I start digging in, I usually find that one of these is at the core of why this team member isn't being more proactive and taking more ownership in the business. Now, the first thing I typically find and look for is, does this team member have a clearly defined role? Oftentimes, the role of the team member is pretty muddy to begin with. Maybe you weren't clear on what a community manager really does when you hired them, but you've gotten more clear over time, but that clarity hasn't been transferred and communicated to this team member as their roles and responsibilities have shifted. Usually we hire people and then we get more clear on what their roles and responsibilities should be, especially if we're hiring for this role for the first time. But we never go back and have a realignment conversation with that team member to make sure that their new job description, their new roles and responsibilities, their new goals has been effectively communicated. So they're operating on a different playbook than you want them to be operating on. And this doesn't mean that assigning them certain tasks, mentioning projects to them, or having quick side conversations is changing that trajectory for them. It really does require a very specific conversation to clearly redefine that role and their responsibilities, as well as any key performance indicators. So let's say that you had a community manager to start, and maybe this is somebody that you hired without really understanding what a community manager really is. And over time, they were really great at being a community manager and leading the community. But retention became a focus for you, as it does for many people who join my Retain Group Consulting program. And then what you found is you wanted to take this community manager and now put them in charge of retention and put them in the program. And you're like, well, they're not taking a proactive role anymore. So oftentimes we add people to programs, we change their goals for their role without clearly communicating that. So you want to make sure that they know the area they are supposed to own and the key outcomes that are associated with it. And that may mean a realignment conversation. It may mean that you need to do some work on getting more clear on what their role and responsibilities are, knowing that we can't just keep adding more to their role without taking some things away. Other times, it's because the team member doesn't feel empowered. So, not like we need to give people their power. They should feel like they have it anyways, which is a whole nother conversation. But many times when people are in a role where there's a business leader, somebody in authority, especially if they're newer to the role, they're going to feel like they need specific permission to lead into activities or projects that haven't specifically been assigned. And sometimes they are not as comfortable with speaking up and offering new ideas or taking leadership in certain areas because that's not their natural bent. They're just not naturally bent to initiate conversation around new projects versus to just provide feedback, take directions, be a really great implementer. Now, one thing that you want to look for when you're hiring people, if you can, is their Kolbe score, Kolbe. If you're not familiar with Kolbe, just take a look at it. But it does talk about what it requires of an individual to take action. And it will help you understand who's more of an implementer or who needs more information before they can move forward with a project and who are more of your risk takers and your idea givers. There are often 2 very different types of people, but sometimes it's just a matter of people not feeling empowered. They haven't yet been told that you want them to be proactive, that you want them to be looking for problems to solve, that you want them to come to the table with new ideas. And honestly, if they report directly to you as the business owner, have you given them the space to come to you with new and fresh ideas? Or is every meeting a quick implementation meeting and a check-in on what's happening and where are you and how are these things going, without creating space for them to share innovative ideas or new initiatives? So that's the second thing, is do they feel empowered, and have you given them the space to actually show up proactively? And then the third is really, they're overwhelmed. Their task list is way too long. They're stuck in reactive mode. So when they open up their Asana or their Monday or whatever you use for project management, they're looking at a bunch of overdue, deadline-oriented tasks that have to be done or a ball is going to be dropped. And if your team member is spending the majority of their day in a reactive, putting out fires, deadline-driven work life, it's very hard for them to do the strategic, high-level thinking, deep work that you are requiring them if you want them to think more proactively. So like I said, we really need to look at their plate. You need to look at their day-to-day and help them or walk them through the action priority matrix, which I teach in another episode. But have them walk through that action priority matrix to help them understand how they can prioritize their own work and come to you with ideas on how they can create more space for them to do the more strategic and proactive work that you want them to do and get themselves out of reactive mode, okay? They just don't have that space to think strategically, and they don't want to drop balls or not put the fire out or not meet a deadline because you want them to be more proactive. So we have to make sure it's realistic for them to have that time. And then finally, sometimes they just don't have what it takes to lead. I find that this is more rare than anything. This most often happens when we hire lower level employees like virtual assistants, and then we promote them to community manager, and now we want them to be a retention director or something. That tends to be where I see this most. But they don't have what it takes to lead at the level you want. They're not a strategic thinker. Their brain doesn't work that way. They like operating and are comfortable operating from a place of reactivity, from a place of implementation. You just tell me what to do and I'll get it done. Give me the checklist and I'll get that task done. And they're not actually comfortable with problem solving and strategic thinking. One way that you can look for this outside of the Kolbe is you can do a StrengthsFinder assessment. I really like the StrengthsFinder test. It's a great way for you to really identify where people excel and kind of how their brain is naturally gifted. And that isn't going to be everybody's natural gifting. Again, I do find that that's more rare. It's usually our fault as the leader. We haven't done one of those other things that we talked about. And it's less about the individual, but every now and then it is truly that person is just not capable of leading at that level. They have reached their max capacity for leadership. They have reached their max capacity for ownership inside of your business. And then you have to make the decision as to whether it's time to replace them or whether it's time to promote somebody else or hire into a new role that's at a more strategic role. And many of you, I think, are trying to have team members that are doing director, manager, coordinator, assistant level work, all 4 of those levels. And at some point, we have to realize it's very difficult for people to operate in all of those different levels of functionality. You've probably done it really well because you're an entrepreneurial mindset, but most people can't do that really well. So we need to figure out, where are we trying to get people who are assistant or coordinator level roles and thinkers to become director and manager level roles and thinkers, but they're not ready for that. Okay, so first we need to look at, do we have very clearly defined roles and responsibilities and key outcomes for this person? Have we actually sat down and had a realignment moment around what those are? Second, does this person feel empowered to lead proactively in the business? Have we told them specifically we want them identifying problems and working to solve them? Have we told them we don't want them just waiting on us to tell them what to do? Have we told them that they are to lead in this area? Have we also created the space for them to come to the table with those ideas and to come to the table with those problems as well. Then thirdly, do they actually have the time in their agreed upon 20, 40, whatever hour work week to handle proactive problems, to think strategically, or is it always reactive, deadline-oriented things that are filling their task list for the day? Do they know how to create space for deeper work? And if not, can we teach them? Can we support them in learning how to reprioritize, how to delegate, how to delete, how to create a new schedule for themselves that actually has time blocks for strategic and deep thinking? And finally, if we have addressed all of those things and we're still dealing with a team member who is largely not taking initiative, is not proactive, is not leading strategically in the business, then we can ask ourselves, do we just have somebody who isn't created to think that way and lead in that way, or isn't even comfortable or willing or wanting to do that? And the Colby, as I said, in the StrengthsFinder can help us. Many of you need a really great leader by your side. You need somebody who isn't just waiting for you to tell them what to do. And this is a big shift that can happen in business with business owners. In the beginning, you want implementers, you want yes people, you want somebody who's just going to do what you tell them to do it, when you tell them to do it, how you want them to do it. You need to be able to move fast. You need to be able to offload a bunch of tasks. But over time, you realize that you have decision fatigue, that you have overwhelm, that you can't own acquisition and retention and operations. And so you start to try to elevate these team members into these roles where they have more ownership over certain key areas of the business and certain KPIs or OKRs, right? Key performance indicators and objectives, right? So you want that person to be that because you need it. You need it as a business leader as you reach new levels in your business. But oftentimes we don't do a proper job of elevating that person into that role, or that person isn't a fit. And we need to hire into that role versus elevating somebody into the role, which can be hard because we don't trust people we don't know. We're comfortable with this person, but sometimes they've reached their max level of contribution inside of your business, and that's important to recognize. But I don't want that to prevent you. If you get to the end of these 4 things, if you will, if you get to the end of that road and you recognize that this person is not the strategic leader that you need, I don't want you to go, okay, well then I just am going to have to be that person still. I want you to ask yourself the question of who, what are the qualities? What should you be looking for? What's their experience? Who do I need to become my strategic partner, my thought leader in this particular area of the business? Somebody who can own that key objective of acquisition or retention or whatever it might be. Okay. So hopefully this is helpful. I say this because I get so many private direct messages, so many emails and Voxers from my clients who are struggling with this with various team members. And we do our work inside of Retain, working with these leaders and with our private clients to help develop these leaders, to help work through these 4 things that we talked about. And sometimes we do have the gift of being able to elevate leaders into new roles. Sometimes we see them step up and just become really rock stars in the business. And then sometimes we have to walk through letting that employee go or hiring somebody at a higher level role. But I want you to think about these because I know that if you're not at this place in your business yet, you are most likely going to get there. So help prevent for yourself that irritation that can happen between an employer and employee by walking through these 4 steps, making sure that you have all 4 of these things in place before you elevate somebody into a higher level of expectation and ownership in your business. And if you're a membership owner and you have a leader on your team, a community leader or retention or member experience leader, and you want them to get supported by me, you want them to be mentored by me and to be in a community of other leaders, and you want to see them step up and be more proactive, I'd love for you to learn about my Retain program. Just click the link in the description or send me a message asking about Retain, and we can give you all the details. But that's a small group consulting and mentor program for business owners and retention leaders with established memberships that could be a great fit if you find yourself in this place needing that level of partnership where somebody is owning retention so that you can really own acquisition and the operations of the business. I'd love to come alongside you and help you with that.